Okay, as we move from the spinal cord anteriorly into the brain, we see some changes in the distribution of neural cells that are involved in the process of relaying information in and out of the brain. Recall that in the spinal cord you had gray matter in the dorsal horn that would receive sensory information, and then you had gray matter down in the ventral horn that would send information out, the motor branch of the thing. That basic pattern continues up into the brainstem. When you get into the medulla, the myelencephalon region, the mesencephalon region up in there, you're going to see that same kind of a pattern, but things become a little more specialized as you go from the ventral side of the brain to the dorsal side of the brain. So in this diagram here, we have the general pattern of neural signal separation, with this being our basal plate elements down in here, this being our alar plate elements, the more dorsal set, up in here. There are three general regions or groupings here in the ventral portion, the basal plate portion, that are motor in function. They send signals out. I'm going to circle these here with a green marker here. So these are all efferent, E-F-F, E-R-E-N-T. That means they are motor in function. Those up here, and these warmer colors up in here, these are receiving signals. So they're in a group by themselves. We'll circle that in red to indicate that they are sensory, associated with sensory functions up here. And this is that lateral sulcus that we had, same as we had in the spinal cord when it was in early development, that lateral limiting sulcus in there that divided the dorsal group from the ventral group. We see that in the embryological stages of the formation of the myelencephalon, mesencephalon regions of the brain as well. Now, you can see that we have a whole series of names here, and we have a whole series of different colored regions in the wall of the brain. Now, to understand a little bit about what's included in each of these individual segments, what kinds of neural signals they're either taking in or sending back out. Okay, we've tried to coordinate these colored dots here with the functions that they're responsible for over here, and we'll try to connect this terminology to what we're seeing happen in the neural signal exchange that's occurring here. These are all sensory groups here. All this up in this part. You'll see the first one is labeled special, somatic, afferent. Special usually has to do with like specific kinds of senses, like sight and hearing, or those two that are involved there. Somatic means it's not part of your internal visceral component, not associated with the pharynx or esophagus, stomach and intestines and lungs and those things inside there. So if it's not associated with those, it's more of a superficial, typically, on the body, then that's in that group. So that's somatic versus visceral. The terms general and special are a little hard to sort out sometimes. Afferent and efferent are always a little pretty easy to sort out. So the first one here, this pink dot, vision and hearing information coming in from the sense of sight or from hearing will come into this general region in the brain. That's the level on the side of the brain in this spectrum. That's where it would come in there. It's a special, somatic, afferent. Special, it's a special sense. Somatic, it's not associated with the gut in there. Next, in the red here, from the sensory, from the face, from the region of the external ear, next the auditory meatus, the ear hole, and then finally the ear canal. These are coordinated through different nerves, 5, 7, 9, and 10, face, ear, meatus, and canal, as you go down the line. These are general, somatic, afferent. This gives us the sense of touch or pressure or pain or heat, cold anything affecting the face, ear, auditory meatus, or ear canal. Those sensations coming into the brain there are at this level in that spectrum, right there. And in part, the diaphragm, and I'm not sure exactly how the diaphragm works in there with the others, but somehow that's included there. Next, in the orange right here, general visceral afferent. So this is a general sense. It's visceral, having to do with somehow the pharynx gut association here. The sense of smell is included in this. It's originally part of that oropharyngeal space that develops there from the stomadeum and the connections there. So it's grouped with the visceral general sensations. Usually smell is not considered general either. But anyway, that's in there. Oral mucosa, that's the lining of your mouth, is coordinated through nerve number 7. Back further a little bit, the pharynx and palate in number 9. And then thoracic and abdominal viscera from your internal organs there. That sensation also coming in there as part of your general visceral afferent. That follows strictly the definition of general visceral afferent. Those others. Smell doesn't seem to quite fit, but that's where it points. And then finally, the one in purple here, that's all taste. The sense of taste coming through different nerves. We have most of our taste from the anterior part of our tongue through nerve number 7, part of the back of our tongue through nerve number 9, and there are some odd lingering taste bud connections even back beyond your tongue and your pharynx associated with nerve number 10. So taste is considered a special sense in this case. It's visceral, and this is afferent, obviously. It's incoming information. So these are your sensory regions, all these in this region of that kind of circular look of things. They come in that part of the spectrum, of these neural centers that span from the bottom of the brain to the top of the brain. So we can see that they can be assigned according to those, and they kind of group together with your general visceral afferent information from your pharynx, thoracic and abdominal visceral, your mouth, all those things come in here, and they include smell with that. And then general sensation from the face, the ear region, and the diaphragm come in just above that. So those are somatic, not visceral. And then special somatic afferent, not having to do with the nose or pharynx or gut at any level. The eyes and the ears out here. Special somatic afferent information. Next, we're going to look at the efferent, the outgoing motor segments here, so we'll identify those. All right, here we go. We now have functions listed for general visceral efferent, special visceral efferent, and somatic efferent. Those three centers are general regions of that spectrum of neural centers in this brain here. So associated with this green color right here, we have iris and ciliary body. Remember, these are motor functions. These are efferent signals, outgoing signals. So they send motor signals to the iris and ciliary body of your eye. It controls the focusing of your eye and pupil diameter there. Lacrimal and salivary glands, so your tear production and some of your salivary production there. Everything except for the parotid gland, which is on the side, on one of your salivary glands on the side of your head, that is coordinated through number 9. Nerve number 9, so lacrimal and salivary through nerve number 7, parotid gland through nerve number 9. But they're still considered general visceral efferent, as are thoracic and abdominal ganglia. So a lot of the control of secretions and activity of your digestive system, your stomach, your intestines, and so forth, is controlled through nerve cells that are in that particular region of the brain. Next, special visceral afferent. Most of these are muscles associated with the mouth and pharynx. The chewing muscles associated with arch number 1, the first arch, coordinated by nerve number 5. Second arch muscles going mainly to the hyoid region, through nerve number 7. Then third arch muscles further back in the pharynx, nerve number 9, controlling those. And then fourth and fifth arch muscles even further back in the pharynx, nerve number 10, controlling that. Neck and shoulder muscles, coordinated through nerve number 11. Nerve number 11. It's called the accessory to the vagus nerve, accessory to nerve number 10. Finally, the somatic efferent going to the structures outside of the viscera, the exception of tongue there, I guess. But anyway, that's included in the group. Eye muscles. We have 3 cranial nerves, the 3rd cranial nerve, the 4th, and the 6th cranial nerves, all controlling movement of your eyeball. So that's included in this somatic efferent group, as are the tongue muscles in there that control the tongue. I've drawn another little diagram here to the side of our cross-sectional view of the motor and sensory centers of the brain to kind of show that they're not, in a longitudinal view, those efferent or motor signals do not extend as far up into the front of the brain as do the sensory portions. So you have sensory functions in the red, and you have motor in the green. I draw the green to the middle, just like if you'd cut down the middle of the top of the brain and then laid it open, your sensory then would be more to the outside and motor to the middle. But anyway, sensory's on top and motor's down deeper and toward the floor of the brain there. But these are not uniformly represented as you go up through the brain. So there are places within the brain where you're going to have maybe a large mass of brain centers here that have to do with motor function there, and maybe another center up here that expands and becomes larger. So you'll have different centers along this pathway that specialize in different motor functions as you move up through the brain from the front to the back. They kind of correspond to those numberings of cranial nerves that we talked about a minute ago, with cranial nerves number 1 and 2 being up here in the front, sense of smell, and your vision going on up here. You don't get any motor functions until you get to cranial nerve number 3, which is centered back here toward the mesencephalon. It's where you have those motor centers that control eye movement. So anyway, for both the motor portion and the sensory portion, there are special ganglia and structures that will develop in association with these columns as you move from the front to the back of the brain. A couple of points I want to make before we get into the details of this drawing. First of all, there are a couple of terms to be familiar with. The term nucleus, when we're talking about the nervous system, generally refers to a concentration of nerve cell bodies inside of the central nervous system from that early neural tube that we talked about. So if there's a growth of cells within a specific location within that developing brain that have usually a related function, they all control one particular kind of function or a related set of functions in the body, those are referred to as nuclei. So you have a nucleus of cells in the brain to control one thing. Those tissues that are found outside of the central nervous system that are involved in neural functions like that are called ganglia. So a ganglion is a cluster of nerve cells, or ganglion cells we usually call them, outside of the central nervous system that are important in relaying information in or conducting information to some part of your autonomic nervous system out there. So with that in mind, recall that in the cross-section of the spinal cord, incoming messages passed through a ganglion, the dorsal root ganglion, on the way into the spinal cord, so that the sensory information was coming in that ganglion. That ganglion had its origin from neural crest tissues, not from neural tube tissues. So it's part of the peripheral nervous system, that ganglion. Other examples of structures that are outside of the central nervous system that function as ganglia are going to be illustrated here. First of all, from the ectoderm, the outside surface ectoderm of the developing head, we have several locations that become eventually part of a ganglion that's involved in neural function. I have some labeled here. First of all, the olfactory placode is a little bit different than all of the others, but it sets up a plate of olfactory cells that will develop into neural cells that relay signals into the brain and the olfactory lobe. So that develops first from surface ectoderm on the front of the head. The lens placode is a different kind of placode. It does not become part of the neural arrangement, but it still is a placode on the outside of the head that's developing there. Trigeminal placode becomes part of the ganglion of the fifth cranial nerve. The fifth cranial nerve, the trigeminal placode, along with some other neural crest tissues on the inside. There's a facial placode we call the geniculate placode, part of nerve number 7. Part of nerve number 9, the glossopharyngeal, also called petrosal, a cluster of cells on the surface that will move in deep into the body and become part of a ganglion there. Next, the acoustic, sometimes called vestibulocochlear. It's part of that 8th cranial nerve, has to do with the sense of hearing, and that's a vital part there. Next, the vagus placode, it's also called the nodosal placode. The nodosal placode, it, along with some other neural crest tissues, will come together to make up a placode, or a ganglion rather, that relays signals into the brain. So when we talk about any of these cranial ganglia, they can be either a single structure derived from a single placode, like the acoustic here, or there may be a combination of elements forming the placode. So these are neural crest things. This is part of nerve number 5. So it's going to come together with the trigeminal placode here, and that's going to make up one major ganglion of 2 parts, a neural crest part and a placode part. Next, the ganglion number 7, the facial placode. Part of its neural crest, part of it's from the geniculate ganglion over there. Let's see, next, nerves number 9 and 10 both come from both placodes and from neural crest. This is number 9. This is number 10 here. So components from this part combine with vagus and with the glossopharyngeal placode or petrosal placode there. So we're going to see some things get together. We get the neural crest and the surface placode here to make a ganglion. We get this part here and this part here to come together to make a ganglion. This one, the facial, nerve number 7, trigeminal, 5th cranial nerve there. So we're going to combine neural crest tissue and placode tissue to make a ganglion here. And the functions of these 2 different parts of the ganglion are not going to be the same. They're going to form one structure, but they will have different nerve groups derived from these 2 different parts, whether it was neural crest in origin or whether it was ectodermal placode in origin. There. The acoustic is the only one that doesn't seem to have much of a contribution from the neural crest. It stays pretty much by itself as a single ganglion, the vestibulocochlear ganglion. This illustration shows, based on actually a chicken embryo's brain development, the positioning of some of these structures on the side of the head. So the floor of the brain would come across about right here. This would be extending from the lateral floor and sides of the brain. Up in front somewhere in there, you might still be able to detect part of that olfactory placode that was in there for the sense of smell. So that placode is still in existence out there. We haven't lost that placode. So that would be part of the neural structure up inside there. I've outlined the major nerves with black pen, and I've indicated the part derived from ectodermal placode for the brown, and then the part derived from neural crest with blue in the pictures here. So we know that the olfactory nerve is nerve number 1. So there's number 1, cranial nerve number 1, the olfactory placode portion of that, nerve number 1 right there. The second cranial nerve would be your optic nerve, so it's only sensory, it's not associated with the placode. The third cranial nerve is only motor, it only sends signals out from the floor of the brain. It does not have a ganglion associated with it, at least not in the same way as these. The fourth cranial nerve goes to motor movement of the eye. The sixth cranial nerve also goes to the eye. So 4 and 6 would be to either side here, but they don't have a ganglion. This is nerve number 5. That's part of it there, that's part of it there. It's actually divided into 3 major nerves that leave from the 5th ganglion here. So anyway, that's part of it. The next back here, this is going to be number 7. Nerve number 7. The placode portion of nerve number 7. This is the placode portion of nerve number 9. And this is the placode portion of nerve number 10 here. So this is the base of nerve number 5, right here. This is the base of nerve number 7. That's the neural crest portion, I should say, of the cranial ganglion. And here we have combined numbers 9 and 10, the neural crest portions here. So we have 9 being in the front part here and 10 being in the back part of that single mass there. And I forgot to mention number 8, our acoustic ganglion right there. This portion of nerve number ganglion, I should say number 10 right here, is known as the jugular ganglion. And the one in front of that is known as the superior ganglion. Now, let's see, let's go up to the next one right here. This is simply known as proximal 7, the proximal portion of nerve number 7 there. Similar sort of thing going on with nerve number 5. This is all what's called a semilunar ganglion, this entire structure. Semilunar ganglion, or Gasserian ganglion is another name given to it, but it's a ganglion for nerve number 5. So it has a neural crest portion, and has a ectodermal placode portion. Nerve number 7 also has a neural crest portion and a ectodermal placode. Same as with 9 and number 10. Some other names given to some of these. We've already mentioned that vagus nerve number 10 is also known as the nodosal. This one is known as the petrosal. Number 7, this is known as the geniculate. And we refer to this as trigeminal, but really this whole thing is treated as trigeminal. The trigeminal nerve. And this is facial. All this number 7. Number 9 would be glossopharyngeal, and this is vagus. Number 10, according to the names of the cranial nerves they're associated with. So these are different sensory ganglion routes. There's incoming information that will come in, the ganglion cell that's in here will relay that information on toward the brain.